Hello everyone! You're right, it's very odd that this is the first Dragon Ball content video I posted after Akira Toriyama's passing. It's basically got nothing to do with him. But I'll be honest, it's hard to get my thoughts together to even try tackling a video attempting to go over and respect his legacy. It's just that because of his passing, the entire internet has Dragon Ball on the brain, and then so do I, even more than usual, so it gave me motivation to want to talk about Dragon Ball in general. For months, I've been trying to script a video about Gohan and his role in the most recent film and how Superhero essentially fixed Gohan as a character, but I just keep getting sidetracked because there are so many things I want to talk about and so many angles I can cover. So for the sake of actually getting something out there for once, I decided to make a smaller video about just one thing that I wanted to discuss about it all. Gohan's character isn't really that complicated, as much as I like to talk about it. In fact, almost all of the complications come down to one creative decision in one important movie, Resurrection F. Resurrection F isn't really something I get that upset about. It was the first Dragon Ball thing that came out after I became a fan of the series, and I'm not passionate enough about it to call it a bad movie. But I think it does have a surprisingly large number of moments in it that make longtime Dragon Ball fans turn their heads and say, I don't think that makes sense. And I think an issue is that because Resurrection F ended up being a large part of the backbone that kicked off Dragon Ball Super as a brand, they had to stick to a lot of those decisions, even when they noticed that there were essentially continuity errors within them. Some of those errors they got a chance to correct with the Dragon Ball Super TV series redoing the movie, but others they really couldn't, including the really significant one for Gohan in particular. It really can be explained in 2 words. Super Saiyan. Gohan goes Super Saiyan in Resurrection F. For a quick recap, this is essentially a continuity error because during the fight with Majin Buu, Gohan undergoes a magical ritual to unlock his potential, and after that, his new power is far stronger than Super Saiyan without him having to go Super Saiyan at all. But come Resurrection F, Gohan mentions he can use Super Saiyan, he thinks, and in fact uses it to defeat an opponent Piccolo is struggling with. There's a lot to unpack about this and why it doesn't really make logical sense within the context of the Dragon Ball universe. Generally, people don't usually lose power-ups, even when they haven't been training. Gohan didn't train for 7 years between Cell and Majin Buu, but he was still able to use Super Saiyan and kind of Super Saiyan 2. And Piccolo also got a power-up in the Cell arc that made him essentially stronger than a regular Super Saiyan, so it doesn't even sound right that Gohan going Super Saiyan could take out a guy in one shot that Piccolo was having trouble with. Maybe if he was Super Saiyan 2 in that scene, but there was no lightning effects, so it probably wasn't. There are still people who debate the differences between Super Saiyan and Super Saiyan 2 in the manga, in the Buu arc in particular, so this stuff still isn't clear-cut amongst fans, and this just adds to the general confusion of it all. The reason why this all matters is because I think when you look at the script for Resurrection F in isolation, Gohan is supposed to be portrayed as reasonably competent and impressive. He's the strongest character in the situation, besides Goku, Vegeta, and Frieza. Frieza says he could basically take care of the 1,000 soldiers single-handedly if he chose to. He saves Piccolo from a dicey situation. And yeah, sure, he gets nearly killed by Frieza without Frieza even needing to transform, but I think that serves a very clear purpose in the narrative, that Frieza is now a very significant and dangerous threat that Goku and Vegeta may have trouble with, and they need to get there as soon as possible. It's there to show off how strong Frieza is and to provide tension for them to arrive quickly. Even giving Gohan a tracksuit is kind of respectful. What was Akira Toriyama always drawing himself as wearing? Tracksuits. I think the vibe they were going for with that character design decision wasn't that Gohan should look weak and skinny, but Gohan is basically wearing dad clothes because he's a dad now, and the joke is that the guy in the dad clothes can still kick alien butt because Dragon Ball is a silly series and there's always room for jokes. But because of the whole Super Saiyan issue, because Gohan had seemingly lost not just 1 but 2 transformations, it makes him look weak from the eyes of any Dragon Ball fan who remembers previous events of the series. And it makes it look like he struggled against Frieza because he had gotten weaker since Majin Buu, and not because Frieza is just that much more powerful now. it makes the storytelling a lot more confusing. So if it didn't make any sense and actively made the storytelling of the movie more difficult, why did it happen? I've had several thoughts about it over the years, between they wanted it for merchandising purposes, or they wanted to show a Super Saiyan in the plot for Frieza to see one and then make a remark about it, but I think nowadays my theory is just that Akira Toriyama specifically wrote it that way, so the movie staff took it at face value and put it in exactly as written. Sometimes it can be just that simple. If the original author wrote those lines in, are you gonna say, no, that doesn't make sense, we need to change it? Maybe they thought Toriyama was up to something and said, okay, let him cook, let's just leave it as is. But this one decision caused an untold amount of grief around Gohan's character and writing Gohan's character for the next 6 years. Because Resurrection F, perhaps unintentionally, but nonetheless set a precedent that characters, and Gohan in particular, could in fact lose their most powerful forms if they hadn't been actively training. And that meant that they would have to justify whether characters had been training in between stories to maintain the powers that they had shown off in previous arcs every time. It also essentially implied that characters who wouldn't normally train, like Gohan, who had a wife and a child and a career that wasn't about martial arts, would thus always be losing power unless an abnormal situation happened that forced them to train again. Meaning that basically every time we saw Gohan on screen, characters would have to explain whether he was training, to explain whether or not he was using a transformation, and sometimes even with all of that, it didn't seem to be internally consistent between arcs and episodes and writers. I don't think this issue was ever fully resolved until Superhero, which sort of hand-waved away the idea that not training would be a major factor in determining someone's current level of strength. They could be training in small doses without other characters knowing. And actually, sometimes it's not such a big deal. Sometimes all you need to do is see your daughter in danger and instantly snap back to where you were at your peak because it's more of an instinct than a transformation. And maybe you can just get your power back by being in the right emotions no matter what you were doing in between time skips. But man, it took a long time to get to that point. So much so that I have a deep suspicion that people supervising the script for Superhero were specifically thinking about how Resurrection F had affected the writing of Gohan over the years. Why else would they have plot points and explanations behind when he can use Super Saiyan, when he can use Ultimate, and when he can get a new power-up that no one's ever seen before? I maintain that anybody who decided that adult Gohan needed a new regular hairstyle is at a level only reserved for people who think way too much about Gohan on a regular basis. Like me. And that's just one thing that was covered in Superhero, and how I think it managed to write out the dilemma of Gohan being in a fighting situation by saying that actually it was never a dilemma in the first place. I just think it's wild that one plot point in a movie caused so many problems later down the line. Like I said, I can talk about Superhero for way too long, and maybe that's a problem, but hey, Dragon Ball's cool. And I hope you enjoy me rambling about this stuff whenever I feel like it. See you soon.